in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What's a pity? Tomorrow never certain. What draws behind the curtain? The face of evil smirking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble from LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannon could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. Hey, I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, to my channel. My name is Ike Ogiamian, and over here we talk about being better and doing better. As a matter of fact, being better as a result of doing better. And what are we doing today? What are we doing today? We're having a conversation today, ladies and gentlemen. But first of all, shout out to the chat. A conversation as usual. We have a hypothesis. We have a theory to test out. We're going to do some interlocution, ladies and gentlemen. Shout out to Kweku in the house. Shout out to Sir Anthony, Aaron B. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. So tonight, this evening, on this occasion, our guest is an author and a media personality. He authored the Amazon bestseller, The Book of Obsidian, a manual for the 21st century Black American, or is it African American gentleman? He'll get me for misquoting that. This is a well-researched book that asks the question, what do you owe to the community? What does the community owe to you? When it comes to the state of relationships and families amongst the African American population, how is the individual gentleman, as it says in the subtitle of the book, the manual for the gentleman. How does the individual gentleman, how is he supposed to navigate the maze of the dating and family within the population where out of wedlock births seem to be the norm, divorce rates are rising, and the dire effects of these particular statistics are seen in other group measures of socioeconomic outcomes, if you will, right? We know the story. As I mentioned earlier, it's a well-researched book on the macro scale. It outlines the shifts in the marriage statistics and the, shall we say, the family dynamics through Reconstruction / Jim Crow / passing the post-civil rights era, let's say. What are the changes we have seen? What are the stories that explain that? And on the micro scale, it tackles the idea of the different classes of people, some which have different privileges than others, right? The select versus the non-select. This class structure is key here. And it's also a very culturally astute book. You know, it goes over popular culture and its icons such as Oprah and Derek Jackson, for example. And well, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, how's it going, Mr. Obsidian?
Yeah, what's going on, man? How you doing?
I am doing very well. It's nice to see you back. Let's get right into it, sir.
Okay.
In broad strokes, regarding the current state, right, of the Black community vis-a-vis relationships, right? And how would you say that, where would you say we are? And how would you say we have gotten to this point? Just in broad strokes, maybe just a rough strokes history. Yeah.
Well, what happened is that the events of the 60s and 70s, the various movements that took place, civil rights, women's movement, anti-war movement, and so forth. Of course, they were major tumultuous events for the entire country, read whites, etc. But for Black people, it was particularly poignant because, unlike the rest of the country, Black Americans had been oppressed, had been held back, had been stymied, stultified by way of, Jim Crow, which was a continuation essentially of slavery of a sort, with the end of slavery in 1865 and, the fits and starts through the Reconstruction period going up until turn of the 20th century. So much of the 20th century saw Black folks kind of still chafing under Jim Crow, and then, the late 60s or mid 60s into the 70s come along, and suddenly Black folk are free. And it raised a number of very interesting challenges. And one of those challenges were, are Black men and Black women still on the same page after they're set free? A lot of issues between Black men and Black women kind of took a back seat to racism, you know. And once that was, pretty much off the table, then, real questions emerged as to whether or not, Black men and Black women wanted to kind of still stay on the same page. It's interesting to note, back in the starting in the 60s, but really accelerating in the 70s, to what we have today, how quickly the Black family fell apart. It was held together all through, the late 19th going into the 20th century, through all of the Jim Crow and so forth. But after all of that pretty much was dismantled, the Black family kind of fell apart pretty quickly. And my theory is, and this is something a lot of Black folks are going to be loath to admit, racism kind of kept us together, in a way that we may not be really wanting to admit. My argument in the book early on is that what we see today is a manifestation of freedom, which Black men and Black women have never really had before until about a half a century ago. And that we discovered that we want different things. Black women we have different ideas of what a good life looks like, of what freedom looks like, and how that plays itself out in real time. Black women have their own idea of it, Black men have theirs. And that kind of set the stage for what we have today.
Very well put indeed. So the idea that freedom will be a problem is something that I should say is a political reality. In other words, freedom is a problem, right? Freedom needs to be weighed against such things as, let's say, equality and also nature. Freedom needs to be weighed against such things as rights, such things as responsibilities, right? So in the world of politics and the whole political economy question, the idea of freedom is not just a good, it is something with which one has to contend, one has to deal with. Now that you have your freedom, what do you do with it? So there's that problem, which everybody has. But then there's the other problem that you're saying, okay, this, for people whom have been in quote unquote captivity, right? Not dealing with your issues, but rather dealing with the outside issue. And perhaps even, perhaps I'm not being unfair if I were to say that some even use the outside issue as an excuse, as we human beings would do anyways, to not deal with other issues, right?
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. So
as a matter of fact, that not to interrupt you, but that's precisely what has happened in the decades since. Our I guess you could call it brain trust, if you will, our intellectuals, thought leaders, and so forth, they have pretty much devoted all of their brain power to the racism question. You know, if you look at, I refer to it as the ebony tower. So you look all these academics and thinkers and intellectuals, and you know, they pretty much every problem that they work on or address is seen through a racial lens. That is to say, were it not for racism, everything would just solve itself. Everything would just go away. You know, we got reparations. We got this is what Ta-Nehisi Coates and others. You know, we just got reparations over. You know, white man just stop hating us. You know, all these problems would just go away. Now, you're a very sharp guy. I know you. I know you know that's a bunch of bunk. Humanity is a little bit more complex than that. And the issues that I'm talking about are things that will not be solved. Can they be ameliorated? Yeah. Can they be attenuated to some extent? No doubt. But solved by, you know, the white man just suddenly liking us and treating us real? What? No, because it's what we're dealing with are human nature when we're dealing with human problems in the backdrop of a 21st century post-industrial, some would say postmodern, information age society, where, you know, first world problems are a real thing. So, I mean, you know, part of being free means that you have the right to be frivolous. You're free to be frivolous. You're free to be superficial. You're free to be petty. That's what freedom means. You know, for a lot of black folk, we didn't have that luxury of being petty. We had to deal with the white man, which was a very real concern back through much of the 20th century. You know, so when freedom came along, you know, we had the freedom to be able to, for example, we'll take black women, for example. Black women had the freedom to look beyond whether or not he was a good provider and love the kids. You know, they could choose on other criteria. Well, the problem with that was, one of the problems was that a lot of black women weren't thinking about the fact that a lot of guys could also choose on criteria other than what's good for the race. You know,
Okay.
what was good for them.
Okay, 100%. And I'm going to make a quick illustration, and then I'm going to ask this question about the individual. I'm going to get to the individual because one of the things that I think that shines throughout this book is it's an individual perspective, in the sense that even in the subtitle, it says for the gentleman, one person, this person,
Right.
What's this person to do? A manual for one person, not for the nation or something like that.
Right.
So let me just paint this picture with regards to, again, to buttress this whole point about freedom being a problem, especially, and also to buttress the point that if you are locked up together fighting a boogeyman outside your door, okay, and as a result of that, you and me, Obsidian, and you, Sir Anthony in the chat, and Hybrid Vigor, we all had to fight this boogeyman outside. So we are locked up inside this place, and we're organizing our food, clothing, and shelter in a manner such as to fight the boogeyman and to coexist. When the boogeyman leaves, okay, all of a sudden we got to look at each other and be like, hey, you know what? I never liked you, Sir Anthony. Whole way, the way in which you go about doing that whole crap thing, and, you know, why must you always do that crap you do in the morning? And I don't want to organize it this way. So that is human nature. That's part of the complexity that Obsidian is pointing out to here, which says, hey, if the boogeyman goes away, all our problems will be solved. It's like, no, the boogeyman goes away. Perhaps that'll be the beginning of our problems.
Indeed.
Because now we have to formulate. We have to now play actual politics, which we've not had the time to play because it had not had the time to evolve because we were distracted, right?
That's right. That's right.
Let me talk about let me ask you about this particular category. Now, looking at the individual and with regards to the class in which he may find himself, there's the select and the non-select. We want to give him a brief, shall we say, definition of what is the select guy and what is the non-select guy, so that you know so that one knows where one is with regards to the sexual marketplace, dating and mating, so on and so forth.
Yeah, they've always been around. You always had ladies, men, and so forth, and you always had guys that were kind of like, you know, on the short end of the stick in that sense. But like I said, after the events of the 60s and 70s, these demarcations became very pronounced because, you know, women, in this case, black women, were free. In the past, you know, it was very difficult for a black woman to kind of cavort with, you know, cads instead of dads because, aside from, the general society being different, and that would be true for whites and so forth as well. But then you had that extra layer of, the big R, racism. So, a black woman back then really paid a heavy price for having a role in the hay with the cad. But after the 60s and 70s events, that was different. You had a very generous and large welfare state. Black women were, going to school at much higher rates than before, gaining, gainful employment in the professions and so forth. So in other words, black women had freedoms, and of course, and this is back in the news as we speak, reproductive freedoms, Roe v. Wade and the pill and so forth. So all of these things kind of came together that, black women could, choose to get with the quote unquote cad or the sexy guy over the more steady Eddie. And that's really what select non-select really breaks down to. I mean, I go into it in the book, in the back of the book, in the glossary. I can get more detail with it, but we all know what we're talking about here. Alpha, beta, whatever word you want to use. I took the term from a fellow black male dating coach that's known in these circles named Ron Wills. I kind of took his idea and really ran with it, and that's kind of like a central thrust of the book. And
100%.
yeah, and in terms of freedom, black women are free to choose it. But here we go again, like you said earlier, with freedoms come responsibilities. And what a lot of black women are trying to do is exercise freedoms on one side and shirk the responsibilities on the other, try to displace it on somebody else. So that's a big
off-gassing, externalizations, as they call it in economics, right?
Right.
You pollute, you just off-gas your pollution, and then the environment pays for it.
Right.
So the non-select guy is supposed to pay for the outcomes of women choosing the select guy. And
very, very much so, in a multitude of ways. I mean, some of it can be direct, some of it can be indirect. But one way that non-select guys kind of pay for it, it works itself out this way. So what a lot of black women, through what I kind of jokingly refer to, not just as the mainstream media, which is white media, but also what has grown up in the past 40 years. And I date it to two main events. One is when Oprah Winfrey moved to Chicago in the early 1980s, and that coincided with the publication and then the adaptation to film of The Color Purple, Alice Walker's novel, The Color Purple. So I dated back to that period. And moving forward, black women had both the dual megaphones of the white mainstream media, academia, entertainment, media, but also started developing their own, what I refer to as black vagina vision media. So you had your own print media essence, and that would grow into other venues. And then, of course, Oprah, which would also develop into other venues and stuff like that. And today you have outfits that, are, very much descendants of all this, Madame Noir, Clutch, The Grapevine, and so on. So, yeah, that's how it came out. And what they would do, a lot of black women would get with the cad or the select F-boy, as I call him in the book, invariably get burned, and then want to say black men ain't sugar honey iced tea. And what I found is that it's very popular to whoop up on the good guy in black America. And I understand part of the reason why that is. It's part of black psychology. Overall, black people, as a result of the racism experience, and it is legitimate. I'm not saying that it's not, but as a result of it, a byproduct of it is that we're very cynical and suspicious. So anything that's good or presents itself as good, we're automatically suspicious of it because we gotten burned one too many times. So we automatically are very suspicious of it. So the idea that America is a good place and has good values, all of that, we're very suspicious of that, very ambivalent about it. Any product of white institutions, white ideas, white concepts. So, for example, like my book is heavily data driven. And I found in talking with a lot of black folks, they instantly resist any type of data driven analysis. And the argument, and I already know the reason why they're resisting it, because, black folks have been, victims of white folks using pseudo analysis, with regard to intelligence, with regard to this, that. And so they fall, victim to the fallacy that because this happens, it's kind of like a post hoc ergo propter hoc thing. So because they did this here, it automatically means that's going to be bad over here. And, of course, my position is no, that's not true. Just because they did that here does not then mean that all data and analysis is bad. But, for a lot of black people, working through all of these things is a very big challenge. There's a big psychological component at work here. And it's going to take time for us to work through it. And for a lot of black people, there's a really excellent book. I think I mentioned it I think I mentioned it in my book. There's a really good book by a black reporter. His name is Eugene Robinson, out of the Washington Post. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner out of Washington Post, and he also was a kind of like a talking head on MSNBC. He wrote a really good book about a decade ago called Disintegration, the Splintering of Black America. And he makes a very interesting argument in the book. He like me, he too looks at the events of the 60s and 70s and observes that Black America is kind of disintegrating into, as he, in his schema, 4 distinct Black Americas. So, and he, demarcates them. For example, he would look at you, Ike, as part of the emergent. And that is to say, blacks who are either direct immigrants to the United States and or the children of Black immigrants to the United States, largely from Africa and the Caribbean. And he argues in the book that blacks like you will not only have a different understanding of America, Americana, etc., but also have a completely different take on what it means to be Black than your more traditional, as we would say today, ADOS Black American. And that your uniqueness in that sense will have its say in what it means to be Black. And that will cause some degree of tension between people like yourself and people like myself. That is to say, immigrants, Black immigrants to the United States who did not, they didn't come through the slavery experience and Jim Crow experience, and Black people like myself who did. So, that's why he calls it disintegration, because there is, in his argument, is there is no singular Black American community. There are, in fact, at least 4 Black communities today, if not more, and they all have their own interests, their own kind of language, so to speak, their own values, and they can indeed often do conflict with the other Black Americas at times. And he argues in the book, the interesting thing that he argues in the book is that one reason why we're so fixated on racism is because that's like really one of the few things we have left that unifies us. Race and racial and racist issues, events, we really blow it out of proportion, the whole Colin Kaepernick thing and all of that. So he says, and matter of fact, Black politicians, and for that matter, white politicians, they really don't know how to appeal to Black folks outside of a racial rubric. That's really the only thing that we really have that holds us together. Because the successes of the 60s and 70s for Black folks, and this is another thing a lot of Black folk don't want to admit, particularly ADOS Black folk. I don't think this is as big of an issue for Black folk like yourself. but that is to say immigrants. But for Adolph's black folk, we're loath to admit that the 60s and 70s worked. Was it perfect? No, it was not perfect. Did everybody benefit equally? No. Are there still problems? Yes. But you can't deny that the needle has moved quite a bit since the mid to late 1960s. The movements worked. The civil rights movement, the women's movement, the anti-war movement, and so on. And the various policy initiatives, Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, Fair Housing Act, etc., etc., etc. They worked. And a lot of I'm talking about Adolph's black now. A lot of Adolph's blacks are loath to admit that. Because see, if you admit that, then you have to answer some other questions. For example, if you admit that those things worked, then you have to ask, why is the black family falling apart then? Why is it a shadow of its former self? Even though racism has greatly receded. Why is that? You can't blame that on racism. How? I mean, how do you make that argument with a straight face? There has to be something else that accounts for it. My argument is that freedom happened. And Robinson argues in his book kind of sort of the same thing. And the challenge in the 21st century, or one of the challenges in the 21st century, is that you're going to have a very interesting, particularly as your group, because they're actually two subsets of the emergent, as Robinson points out in his book. You're the first subset. That is to say, direct immigrants from Africa or the Caribbean, or their children. So in other words, second generation, right? But then there's another group of emergents, and those are the children of interracial unions, biracial people. So I just mentioned Colin Kaepernick, for example. There have been a number. Patrick Mahomes would be another one. Griffin, I think his name is, basketball player. So in other words, you're going to see more and more prominent biracial black Americans. And Barack Obama, they're going to give their unique take on what it means to be black, which can and often does conflict with the more traditional ADOS black American. And that's what Robinson is talking about, that these conflicts, which are not pretty, they're not politically correct, they're not something that we like to discuss. Another major fault line is class, social class. Like he has one group that he talks about that are known as the transcendent. And the transcendent are basically your very successful black Americans. They're not only wealthy, that's part of it. But another part of being a transcendent black is that you have a very high public profile. Okay, so wealth is part of it, but you're also famous. And that has its own kind of wealth. Just being famous, being on what I refer to as the Jumbotron, social media. Being famous in itself, as reality TV shows us, just being famous in itself has its own kind of currency. So you have the wealth component, and you also have this fame component. And that's a very powerful, heady mix. And the transcendent kind of have, transcended, as their name befits, they kind of transcended, more mundane black concerns. Oprah Winfrey, Bill Cosby before his fall, and subsequent, vindication. Michael Jordan, that sort of thing.
Let me stop you there for a second, because you've traversed the land quite thoroughly, showing economic differences and also class-like differences, and then previously you're mentioning cultural differences. And let me mention something there with regards to the immigrant, and then we'll continue, if you will, back to the select F-boy.
Yeah.
But with regards to the immigrant, basically, an immigrant, especially anyone, whether it be from Bengali or Nigeria, coming from the east, okay, from the emerging world to the west, if you will, right? They're here for meeting particular needs which have to do with, shall I say, the lower end of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What I mean is they're coming for economic questions, okay? They're coming for food, clothing, shelter, the establishment of a domicile over here, and also perhaps helping people outside, okay?
Right.
Whether you, there is a whole term. Can I get a one in the chat if we've all heard of the immigrant mentality, right? And it's not specific to, oh, Caribbean immigrant, African immigrant, Russian immigrant. There's something called the immigrant mentality, which means basically, hey, this person left somewhere to come over here where there's an opportunity, and they're after opportunity. They're after money. They're after economics, what we call the lower end of Maslow's hierarchy of needs again, right?
Right.
That gives you a very different view of the situation, okay? So the higher end of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is what the natives tend to concern themselves with after having fed and clothed themselves, right? Then you're worried about things such as self-esteem and representation and self-actualization and what it means to be a Black person in America, right?
Right.
The immigrant is like, what are you talking about? I'm like the fox that got let into the hen house, and I'm here to tear things up. Okay, I'm here to tear as many chickens as possible, gather up my chicken situation, send chickens to Africa. That's the idea. Hence, generally speaking, you're going to see a rift between, shall we say, native populations and immigrant populations when it comes to political ends, right? Because the political ends are very different, because also the immigrant might not even have the right to vote. He might be partially illegal, right? And so on and so forth, in addition to the fact that that's not what he's here for. So generally speaking, we've always had immigrants, and the native populations, shall we say, versus the new immigrant Mexicans versus the Mexican Americans.
Right.
The Chinese, they call them the ABCs, American-born Chinese, versus the FOBs, the fresh off the boat Chinese, right?
Right.
And these people tend to also be the ones that contend most closely with each other, right?
Right.
In terms of, you're going to be fighting your family member, as it tends to be, right?
Right.
Because, and also they have a struggle for identity with each other, right? Which is almost like an ego struggle, okay? So basically, it's just kind of taking some simple psychology and then broadening it into the groups and so on and so forth. So I think that everything that you say there is 100% correct. And then with regards to trajectories now, because I believe you're quoting that as a way of somebody making a prediction, saying that, hey, in the future, what the collective Black experience was before will get, shall we say, diluted, right?
Yeah.
And this dilution, right, will result in something new. So generally, an outline and a broad sketch wise, I see no issues with such an argument or a thesis, if you will. Mm-hmm. Now, not every select guy is a select F boy, right?
That's true.
Because I think you tar and feather the select guys a little bit too much with your.
A lot of people. There have been a number of people who've kind of pointed that out, and if I may, and I think I'm qualified to say this, I said, let me put it to you this way: every Muslim isn't a terrorist, but it's very interesting how many terrorists are Muslims. Mm-hmm. Every select guy isn't an F boy, but damn, isn't it interesting that the F boys just happen to be select guys, and that usually pretty much stops everybody in their tracks.
Indeed. So basically, it's a question of opportunity, right?
Yeah.
If you have opportunity, okay? Because it's like all those people who talk about, oh, all this basketball players are always cheating. It's insane that people think that basketball players are particularly prone to cheating. No, okay? There are two simple things going on there. Number one, they got opportunity. Our Lord's Prayer.
Oh, yeah.
Deliver us from temptation. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Temptation is a big problem, right? Yep. If you can avoid you're blessed for being able to avoid temptation, okay? You sit there in your little hovel in the ground talking about how all those guys are cheating. So number one is the being bombarded with temptation. And then number two is the publicity of it all, right? No one knows your little shitty, Kevin from sales and all the cheating that he's doing doesn't get public attention, right? So, but you are right that, if you do have the opportunity, you're the select guy, you're the guy whom is seen as attractive at a glance, if you will, then, in the, shall we say, liberated sexual marketplace, you can get away with a lot. right? That's all you're saying, right? You can get away with a lot, and the women will let you get away with a lot, and then the other guys would seem to have to pay for it. Now, let's take it. So there's something very individualistic about your book, and you agree to it. Cisbim, what is that? It says save yourself, black man, and it's not
Yeah.
about it's about yourself in order from an individual standpoint, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
that
go
kind
ahead.
of grew up over the past, I'd say, decade of black men online that kind of quasi organized themselves. The idea of black men going to places like, for example, Brazil is nothing new. I've known about it dating back to at least the latter 1990s. And it predates that, going back to the 80s. So it's nothing new. However, in more recent years, and by that I mean within the last decade or so, there has been a small but very noisy contingent of black men online who argue that the American black woman, well, some will say American women in general, but let's just be honest here. We're talking about American black women, right? ADOS, black women, that they become so problematic that black men of any consequence should leave. And some do. They go to, Brazil. Some even go as far as Africa to find mates. And you can't be against it on principle. If you're an American citizen and you believe in what America stands for in this founding document, which is the Constitution, Bill of Rights, then you have to be in support of the First Amendment. And the First Amendment is all about freedom of association. So just on principle alone, I cannot be against SYSBM. I am for freedom of association. And if a black man has made the calculation for himself that his mating needs will be best met elsewhere outside of black America, on principle, I have to support that, because I support the freedom of association. That's part and parcel of the First Amendment. He's an American just like me. So I have to support that.
Okay. Let me take a step back again, because you did a broad sweep over the, shall we say, the black love industry is what you call it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And for the benefit of the audience, if I may just say something, and then you may react or kind of expound upon what the black love industry is. But basically, it's a collection of people whom are marketing and selling delusions that, in your opinion, that the black love is still alive, right? That's the delusion, right? And that's the product. And and they're generally peddled to women, shall we say, by people like Oprah and Steve Harvey and so on and so forth, right? And that this fantasy it leads to what also is called, what you call the Derek Jackson effect, that they're basically, which is basically kind of, shall we say, unchecked hypergamy, that everybody is not going for the select guy.
Right.
Since the whole black love thing has now become a media spectacle, it now has this, shall we say, media proportions, which tend to be blown out of proportion, right? It tends to be fake, and it's Brad Pitt, and stuff like that. So now you have the select guy kind of image out there that, oh, everyone's going to get themselves a select guy, and it's called the Derek Jackson effect. And you say that that the community cannot afford this, if you will. So, and I think you've kind of you weave that one through there. But if you want to speak more on the what you call the black love industry, right, and why it is a problem in this new landscape where there's issues between, as you say, African American men, African American women, divorce rates, unwed, so on and so forth, blah blah blah, right? The stats are there.
Right.
Now there's this industry around it, which also adds an extra problem, leading to the Derek Jackson effect. Can you elucidate that point, if you don't mind?
Yeah. So the 1980s, I talked about Oprah on one side and Alice Walker on the other, and they would end up working together to do the film adaptation of The Color Purple. And so the 1980s comes in, and like I said, one of the interesting things about, or interesting paradoxes of the 1960s going into the 1970s is that at the same time we're getting all these rights and finally being set free, the black family is falling apart. I mean, at a rapid rate. So we have that. So roughly 15 years there, about taking us up into 1980, 81. Oprah comes on the scene as we know her today, circa 1983, 84. So one of the recurring themes of her show is the idea that black women are surging ahead of black men, educationally, financially, culturally. That is to say, black women are more urbane, sophisticated, worldly, curious, whereas black men are kind of, stuck in the past. And then to bring in the color purple end of it, quite a few of these black men are rather mean. So, they're kind of like a kind of mister, So they're not only they're kind of stuck in the amber of the past, but they're kind of mean-spirited people on top of that. And that type of argument fuels what I refer to as the black love machine, which has been for most of its history black female catered. And
aren't you part of the black love machine? Let's hop now, since you mentioned that a couple of times, and I see it. Someone's mentioned it in the chat. So let me ask you now, upfrontly, are you, sir, a dating coach or some kind of a life coach, some kind of shall we say self-help guru? And what would you say to those whom say, hey, whence comes these particular certifications? Which body regulates this, and how does one qualify? And the coaching, for example, is it something valid, empirically tested, so on and so forth? Number one, so are you not part of this black love industry that you're, shall we say, assailing and assaulting? And secondly, are you this coach of any sort? And how do you defend yourself against the validity, or against those who challenge the validity of your industry, sir?
Well, the way I would challenge the way I would answer to both questions is, I don't give a shit. See, black folks like playing this game. For example, we talk about good guys and bad guys with the mating piece. What that depends on what your definition of good is. See, I call it the great Negro word game. See, black folks, when you corner them on a point, now all of a sudden we got to figure out what the definition of is. See, black folks like playing these, these psychological games, the gaslighting and all the rest of it. Well, aren't you part of the love industry? Well, so what? What if I am? What if I'm not? What does that got to do with what I'm saying? See, this is a deflection to get away from my point. Deal with the point. Is what I'm saying with regard to the development of the black love machine accurate or not? Now, if it's not accurate, then explain to me why it's not accurate. Show me the evidence as to why it's not accurate. Whether I am or am not part of the black love machine is irrelevant. Let's go to the next point about qualifications. Oh, I get it now. So now all of a sudden we're going to talk about my bona fides. You didn't say nothing about Derrick Jackson's bona fides. You didn't say anything about Fonda Bosse's bona fides. You didn't say anything about Nicole Michelle's bona fides. You don't say nothing about Danica Marie's bona fides. And you don't say nothing about Six the Goddess's bona fides. You don't say nothing about any of these people. Oprah ain't never been married, but she talk on nothing but about black love. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on. Iyanla Van Zandt, not only Iyanla Van Zandt,
is the claim that okay?
Hang on, Iyanla Van Zandt, and I'm not saying this to take a shot at her. I'm just saying this to demonstrate a point because it's a fact. Iyanla Van Zandt not only got divorced, she got divorced and married to the same guy twice. Okay,
that's not bad actually. If you gotta, but okay, so
she had to do it twice.
Here's the thing. There's the general kind of stink that is out there, let's say, right, about whom is qualified or not. But let's put that aside, right? And let's go back into the gentleman's room where we ask the question, right? What would it be to have high quality? Because in the self-help, shall we, world, there's also that issue, right, where you can have a lot of BS, right? And then you can have maybe some good stuff. Now, and those whom are connoisseurs have the way of judging. Right. So what would you say are some what are the best practices? What are bad practices? I think that you do have judgments as to how some people within the industry, right, the black love industry, whatever, operate and handle themselves, right? So whether you call it a code of ethics or whether you call it producing a high quality product, because for example, your advice in this book about whether it be the save yourself aspect, the be your 10 commandments, if you will, is a kind of an admonishment, right? So what exactly makes yours, and I'm not asking this in that kind of a way, right? But you get what I'm saying. What are the values that infuse your views such that you can say this is of a high quality, and I'm putting this out there as a manifesto, if you will?
Well, I mean, the number one thing that separates me from the rest of the pack is that my work is data driven. So I'm not telling you what I think or my life experience. I don't think my life experience is particularly all that interesting now. As it turns out, quite a few people are interested in what I do in my life. And it kind of takes me aback because I don't think my life is that interesting. What sets me apart from everybody else is not my life's experiences or my witticisms or what I think, but rather the research that I've done and that I present on the science of human mating within the context of a 21st century Black American mating market experience. My
100%.
colleagues, excuse me.
No, I said 100%, and because I mean I started out with my introduction saying that this is a very well researched book, right? And the points that are being made are actually not. Let me put it this way, and I'm sorry for cutting you off, but I just wanted you to kind of. So, what is? I would say that this book, okay, is the taking of, shall we say, the mating and dating industry, right? Not the industry, the state of mating and dating, marriages, the family structure within a particular community, taking that as a lens, okay, or as a focal point to really talk about male stoicism and individuality. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, like in your 10 commandments, for example, a through line that goes through them for me is the world doesn't owe you stuff, okay? Neither are you obligated in a particular way, right? And that things are unfair. There is a rule for the select and there's a rule for the non-select. All this so far is stoicism stuff. It's there are things I can't control, things I cannot control. Give me the strength to withstand those that I cannot, right? And so on and so forth, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? The serenity prayer, the stoicism, and then the individualism, which is saying you play your part, right? You be the gentleman with the hobbies, as you say, rule number 10, right? So I think that it is really a distillation. When I distill it, I find in there stoic individualism, right? Those are the two words, and then all these other things are kind of wrapped in there. So if we go to some of the super chats, which I've been missing, okay, and I think there's some questions in there too.
I wanted to jump in on that point before you go to the super chats, if I may.
Go ahead.
Because the last time around we had to talk about this, I touched on it then and bringing it back now. I didn't think about, Marcus Aurelius or the Stoics, and all that when I wrote this. But I'm glad you brought it up because the last time we talked, I had said that my birthright, a major part of it, aside from being an American and a very proud one, I'm a patriot, is that a big part of my birthright is the Enlightenment, is Jerusalem and Athens, is the scientific method, is the Western tradition. That's part of my birthright. I think Black Americans in general are really selling themselves short and doing themselves a huge disservice by remaining ambivalent at best and hostile at worst to their own birthright, not just as American citizens, but as the recipients and inheritors of a rich cultural heritage that we help to contribute to, I might add, which is the Western tradition. And so it's interesting that you will point out that you see a through line in my 10 Obsidian commandments toward the end of the book, where I kind of put my stake in the ground of exactly where I stand on things. It's interesting that you, as in many ways, an outsider, have this kind of ability to see in what I'm writing the Stoics. But that's part of the Western tradition. And in many ways, I was raised as a Stoic. You know, I'm an amalgamation of many things. I'm part Islam, I'm part Christianity, I'm part Judeo-Christian, I'm part American, I'm part African, I'm part, Jerusalem, I'm part Athens, I'm part Shakespeare, I'm part Locke, I'm all of it. That's what it means to be a citizen of the West. That's what it means to be an American. And I think black people are really selling themselves short by being ambivalent to that at best and hostile to that at worst.
Okay. Let me go ahead and check out these super chats, and there's some questions in there that bear upon many of these topics here. So it's quite interesting because one of the topics that, and perhaps another conversation or whatever, or I don't know what you're working on next, but there's this idea of what exactly is the position of the African American with regards to American patriotism, right?
Yeah.
American patriotism and African Americans. What exactly does that look like? You said contribution also, like, you've contributed to the history of the most powerful country in the world.
Right.
So where is the pride in that? Why don't you take full pride, full ownership? You saying it's your birthright and things like that. And it seems like you're quite passionate about it. But let me grab the super chats and we'll continue real quick, if you don't mind. Shout out to Nick Pin in the house for what seems to be. Let me go ahead and make sure that I can read this here. Well, not read, but see. I know that this one is a super sticker of some sort. Shout out, ladies and gentlemen. Again, our guest tonight, Obsidian Media Network author, media personality, wrote the book of Obsidian. Shout out to Nick Payne for the $10 super chat. He said 100, something like that. And then shout out to you, Black Heights. Black Heights, $10, says, cheers to Brother Ike, always looking sharp, looking fresh. Ain't nobody dope as me. I'm just so.
Yeah, I like that record. That's a good record.
That was a good one. Shout out to Andre Outcast. Shout out to you, $5 super chat. Pemu Meher. Salute. Thank you very much for the $5 super chat. And we move on. And I think that K Polymath had a question here. On the super chat about just, shall we say, traveling. And I noticed you said something, sir. When you said traveling, you said some people go even as far as Africa.
Yeah.
Now, I understand in terms of miles, it is far, but it's not far, right? I mean, it's you get what I'm saying. So it's not so far removed. But anyways, generally speaking, before we get to K Polymath's super chat here, do you have any particular kind of, like I say, ambivalence towards people going there, or is it ambivalent, or do you have something against it, or
absolutely not? Like I said before, absolutely not. Like I said before, I affirm my fellow brothers, my fellow American brothers. I affirm their right to freedom of association. If they've made the calculation that that's the best move for them, I'm all for it.
Okay, so what do you think about what K Polymath here? Shout out to you for the £5, which is over about $7, I believe. So what do you think of what he's saying here, talking about Africa, South America being dangerous? I don't know if you take particular interests in these things and know the movements and the percentages or whatever. But what do you think about what he says here?
I think that it's an individual thing. I don't think that's something that can be applied to a pluralistic. Mating by definition is individual. You're not. That's the reason why you have these conversations online, in black social media spaces, and both black men and black women will talk about these issues in terms of a collective. You're not. And the whole polygamy thing is something that continues to rear its head. But that aside, you're not mating with, the community. Yes, there is a communal aspect to human mating, no doubt. The marriage ceremony is a good example of that. But you're mating with one person. It's a one-to-one type of thing. It's very individual. And, United States has an interesting take on that because in the old world, shout out to Charles Murray on this, in the old world, mating was a very much a communal affair. Everybody was involved. Here in the United States, we stepped away from that to focus on the individual. That's the reason why the nuclear family is basically a uniquely American concept. Around the world, and you'll know what I'm talking about. Like around the world, the nuclear family is a kind of alien concept.
Mhm.
And not just Africa. I'm talking about Europe too. I mean, South America. The idea of a nuclear family, mom, dad, kids. That's a kind of alien concept. The extended family was the family unit throughout the world. Only in America did the nuclear family concept, really, was invented and thrived and flourished for a number of reasons. So, yeah, I think that the idea that should black men do thus and so, I think that's an ill put question. I think it's better to ask, should I, as a black man, do this and do that? And that becomes a individual question. I can't answer that question. It's up to every individual black man to decide for himself what his life is going to be.
Indeed. So there's another question here. Shout out to K Polymath. And I like this because it's something that is tangentially addressed in your book in a certain way. And even in this conversation so far, you have mentioned the phrase postmodern, right? So basically, I see K Polymath here throwing a postmodern jab, saying, hey, Mr. Obsidian, why do you think that this notion, which after all came out of a particular cocoon and development called, freedom, rights, and so on and so forth, which, by the way, we know also is I don't want to get into deep political philosophy, but it is a myth of its own, right? It's not like it wasn't handed down to us from God, like something,
Right.
like that. Like if Genghis Khan came back right now and decided to change the whole system, he'll change it, right? And your rights be damned. So the idea is, okay, can we operate in that mode? And here's what the challenge I would say is this. In other words, it's kind of old to try to operate in that mode because right now people are, in particular case, if your enemy is a conglomeration in the left, let's just say generally speaking, right? Not that this is the Rush Limbaugh show or something, but if they're over there in the left, they're in academia, they're in the media, right? They're in the New York Times, so on and so forth. And then have these as they like to say over here, talking points that are in the feminism end and things like that. Those people tend to play very much power games in the sense of they are not consistent with their arguments. It's about power play. There's a lot of sign language, let's put it that way, right? Shames, insult, guilt need to be not. It's isms and phobes. Oh, you're a xenophobe, sexist, bigoted, right? That tends to be the game. And it doesn't matter because might is right. If they can smother you and so on and so forth, all this talk about the true, the good, and the beautiful, rights and justice and individualism, that's of the past, okay? Now is time for realpolitik, postmodern sword fighting. And is the black man up to that? I would modify the question to say such. And go ahead and speak on that whole flurry of words there.
Yeah, I think that the historical record speaks for itself. I grew up in I was born and raised here in Philly, and I grew up in a section of Philadelphia known as Germantown. Germantown is a technical suburb of Philadelphia, and it was founded before the founding of the United States itself. It was founded in circa 1638 or something like that. And a big part of the American Revolutionary War was fought like only a few blocks away from where I grew up. And the first black soldiers who fought in the Revolutionary War fought only a few blocks away from where I grew up. The Battle of Germantown. You can look this up. It was October 1777, if I remember right. And so I say all that to say that black men have earned their stripes through every war this country has ever had. We've earned our stripes. So this idea of white supremacy and all that's a bunch of bunk. Black men can do anything white men can do. We are limited only by our will to do it. But we want to do it, we can do it. And we've earned our stripes here.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Now, there's another shout out to African Millennial. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. I believe those are Canadian dollars. And check out her channel by that name, African Millennial. She is a African Canadian sister out there, originally from Ghana, and nice, sweet lady. Maybe one of you guys can prove her wrong here regarding getting married in the Americas, and you guys can go wife her up. For those of you looking for continentals. So she just made a comment that it doesn't seem to be worth it to get married here. Which okay, let me ask you something. Let me ask the same question I just asked. Okay, Polymath put it a certain way. I modified it a certain way. You strong armed us by saying, "No, we can do it." Okay. Now let me ask this: the stoicism, the individual stoicism, okay, that you say you're raised with and that your book professes. What is the percentage of men that can live that life? And let's put the theory aside because you know that life from a, shall we say, visceral first person perspective, right? You've gone through things in your life that you had to deal with and overcome. You have a family background, I presume, of such that raised you in that way. And
Oh, yeah.
what do you know about the percentages of people that are actually able to actualize the stoic individualism that you profess?
I think a lot of brothers. This is an interesting question because the older I get, it was pointed out to me on several occasions, and we all suffer from it. It's a human failing. I kind of had my own kind of fishbowl effect, kind of my own myopia. That I assumed that a whole lot of black men were like me in terms of upbringing, outlook, and so forth. And the longer I did the Black Manosphere thing, it became very clear and apparent to me that that was not necessarily true. And so to answer your question, how many black men can kind of live a kind of stoic life a la Obsidian? That's an interesting question. That's a very interesting question. I don't know.
Good. I like it. I like it because when it was placed theoretically, I think because theoretically some black, but when it comes down to percentages, it has to, because here's what I'm thinking, and I may be rambling here. There are privileges. Some particular positions, some moral positions are privileged positions. I'm not being all postmodernist about, you're speaking from a position of privilege. What I mean is, it's almost like you were able to get on a particular hill. Some people don't even have feet, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
The whole privilege thing is part of the woke lexicon these days. And in a very real sense, I was privileged. I mean, watching Kevin Samuel's work over the past, not just over the past year and a half, but I've known him now for the better part of 5 years. So watching him over that arc of time, what became very apparent to me is just how many black men didn't have what I have, and that is to say, a very active and involved and hands-on at times. I would have not preferred him to be so hands-on, hint, father, and very involved grandfather, both combat veterans, both Marines. And if anybody knows, if you know anything about the United States Marine Corps, they have a bit of a different way of looking at things than the other branches of the armed services do. They have a completely different mentality. And it's difficult for it not to rub off on you if you grow up in their household. Like, so
this is a black pill moment that we've been having for the past 5 minutes, right? It's more of like, okay, well, you realize that you're able, as a result of having these particular people in your background who climbed hills themselves and then showed you the example and were able to elevate you up. And from that hill, the perspective says individual stoicism. But if people can't get to that hill, they perhaps can't even see what you're saying, number one. And I'm sure you've experienced that. People come and argue and scream at you in various chats or something like that. And number two, be able to implement it it's another thing. So there's always the idea, and this may not be of your interest at all. You may be like, I'm about the individual and also the individual that is like me, that can enact this particular path. But
Right.
prescriptions for the general population, because you talk about the gentleman, there's a particular aesthetic to it. And also there's this, as I said, there's the ethos of stoicism and individualism. There's also an aesthetic. Before we go to your prescriptions for the general population, what is this aesthetic of the gentleman? Is it just one that you prefer? I know about the rakish, roguish, and refined, and you're sticking with
Yeah.
the refined archetype, if you will. Is this something that you promote? Does this help in any way? Or is it just your particular preference? In other words, is the gentlemanliness or being a gentleman, is it a standard that you would equally say, hey, I'm putting it out there, along with individualism and stoicism, also be a gentleman? Or what? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. The whole thing about the Book of Obsidian was modeled on myself. So that's the conceit about the book. It's very much modeled on me. And so the other, rakish and so forth, those other archetypes per Kevin's schema would be something that, while I'm familiar with them, they're not something that I have an intimacy with in the way I do with a refined thing. What's funny? We was talking one day. This is like 2 years ago. We're talking one day, and I asked him, because I heard him talk about these different archetypes in his schema, and I said, I'm just curious, Kevin, what do you think I fall in the schema? Without skipping the beat, he said refined. He said, what a lot of people don't, in this case, men, don't realize is that it's more than just putting on some clothes. They have to speak to who you are inside. The clothes are just the finishing touches. That's the magic. If there's in the pickup world, there's a concept being called being incongruent. So, you're doing one thing and saying something else, for example. So if you're a person that's naturally rakish or roguish and you try to be refined in look and manner, it's going to come off to other people as, incongruent. Mm-hmm. And he was saying that though you did not come from what we would commonly associate with a refined, gentlemanly background, you didn't go to Eton, you didn't go to Exeter, you weren't born upper middle class, but you have those inherent traits and qualities and characteristics. And so when you do clean up, it makes sense. People, just kind of take it as a given that, yeah, he's always been like that, which is true.
So I believe K Polymath has another super chat right here for us. Shout out to you, sir. One can't judge the select F boy unless, and that's a £5, by the way, about $7, unless you've been given that much freedom and power. Back to the thing that we said before, opportunity and so on, right? And morality is only real under position of power. Good. It's the kind of thing as, being good is what you do when no one is looking. In other words, because when no one is looking is when you have the freedom and the power. And if you're over here without freedom or power, talking about people whom are using their freedom or power, but this gets us into a particular, shall we say, it's a quandary. And perhaps this is, I don't know if, let me ask you now, are you working on a follow-up to this, or perhaps a distillation of it? Because again, I think that, again, it is a work of philosophy, but using the dating landscape as something there. And that this work of philosophy then comes up against a particular thing, which says, hey, isn't it all really about power, right? In other words, the postmodernist question always one has to contend with when one does. Anyways, are you following up and working on anything new? And with regards to this postmodernist stuff,
Yeah, I'm working, well, as it stands right now, I'm working on a kind of Book of Obsidian for the lovely ladies. I'm going to take a stab. This time I want to take a, direct stab right into the heart of the Black love industry. I'm kind of was on the periphery the last time around, because the black dating coaching for Black men business is still very new. So that's still kind of on the periphery of the Black love machine. But my next book is going to go right to the heart of it. That is to say, going to be addressing Black women this time around. And so it's a really interesting project that I have been, fiddling around with now for about a year and a half, since spring of 2020. So I've been fiddling around with it, and I have plans to, finally finish it up. And if everything goes right, inshallah, I'll be out in time for Valentine's Day weekend 2022. So we'll see. Keep our fingers crossed. But and I also have plans to swing back around and finish out the triptych or the trilogy of the Book of Obsidian. I had envisioned it as a triptych. So there's book 1, is volume 1 that's out right now, and I hope to have volume 2 out later in 2022, and then in 2023 I hope to have volume 3 out. So, but some 1,500 pages and all. So yeah,
Indeed. So yes, to reiterate the F-boy concept, especially the select F-boy, because the select male is that guy, and if you, it's the kind of thing where, okay, if you want to know whether you're select or not, if you have to ask, you're probably not select. Ain't that right, Obsidian?
yeah.
If you gotta,
great thing about Black women, unlike women of other races and ethnic groups and stuff like that, the great thing about Black women is they're so florid and direct to a fault. And so, yeah, that sounds about right. If you have to ask what it is, chances are you ain't it, because Black
Exactly.
women are very, very vocal about what they want in men and what they don't want in men. So the good news being Black is that right off the rip what Black women want and what they don't want. So that's a good thing.
That's the select guy. And then the select F-boy is the guy that, because of that position of freedom, power, and privilege, can get away with a lot, and does indeed get away with a lot, and conspires with the women, right? Because they're the ones, they want that guy, right? So they go after him, and they both conspire to F things up. And then people have to clean up. So the non-select guy tends to then be the cleanup guy. Goes the narrative.
I liken it to a roadside bomb, right? Or improvised explosive device. See, right now, and we talking about this, the postmodern thing kind of hangs in the background here. Excuse me. So the argument that's going on, particularly in white intellectual and academic circles, and to some extent political circles, excuse me, is, are there gender differences? Are men and women truly different? That does play a role to some extent over on the Black side. And so what a lot of Black women are having a hard time coming to grips with is that mating for them carries significant implications far beyond themselves. So if they mate well, it can have positive implications, not just for themselves, but for their children, and by extension, their neighborhood, their community. On the other hand, if they mate badly, it will have serious negative implications for their children, and by extension for the entire community. So I liken it to while I was sick, in my convalescence, I spent a lot of time watching war documentaries, right? Afghanistan and Iraq, in that order. And hands down, the most dangerous weapon used against United States NATO coalition forces was the roadside bomb, the improvised explosive device. Did a lot of horrendous damage, not just to the military forces, but also civilians as well. And some of these devices, I mean, they could have a serious, I mean, they could blow a huge crater in the ground, and so I liken the situation with Black women, this mating piece with these select F-boys, and the damage that they can do. I liken it to rolling up on a powerful, big roadside bomb. So you got this huge blast radius. So not only is the Black woman involved herself, but now you got her children involved, and then it extends out. The blast radius extends out to include the community. So now you're looking at collateral damage of other people being affected, right? Windows getting blown out, people catching shrapnel and shards of glass, etc., etc., etc. That's the image I like to use, is the blast radius idea. Black women, women in general, in this case, Black women, mating is never casual for them. because
Mhm.
eggs expensive, sperm cheap.
Mhm.
So mating for women is never casual.
Mhm.
It may look that way.
Mhm.
They may believe it is, but
Mhm.
mating for them is never casual. It always has a heavy price potentially for it.
Indeed. Indeed. So let me ask this, because so far we're talking about an industry, right? The black love industry selling some particular kind of propaganda, shall we say, propagating the F boy story and leading to the Derek Jackson effect, as you call it. There's another thing that, another, shall we say, set of people, and you call it the pro black community, right?
Yeah,
And
the black chef.
they, what are they into? Okay, so from your, let's I give you just distill down 3 points. You could comment on them. Um, the pandering, basically, which, black woman is God type stuff, right? We were kings and queens type stuff, right? And the blame of slavery and Jim Crow type stuff, which
Yeah,
basically is a good way, a good tool when you're stuck, okay, in that building. Remember, you're stuck in and you're fighting the big bad Jim Crow outside. There's certain tools that make sense to use, right? Certain crutches to have. And those crutches, after you're set free, when you come out of the house and you're still holding that crutch, and
right,
you're still, eating with a screwdriver, people are
right,
like, hey, you're no longer in a dungeon anymore. You don't have to keep referring to yourself as a king or a queen. As a matter of fact, you're not a king, right? The king of where? In other words, accountability, reality. Shut the hell up. Ain't no debt. You're not a queen of nothing. Okay? There's accountability and reality, and the shit that
yeah,
needs to be done in the real world vis-a-vis real consequences.
yeah,
And if you have not earned something, it's great, yeah, that you had to use it as a psychological tool to cross a particular river. But
right,
as the Buddhists say, after you cross the river, don't carry the canoe and put it on your head and walk with the canoe. Do you
right,
do that? No, you leave the canoe back there.
right.
So, more or less, you're saying that the pro black community is not helping the situation with their pandering and their we were kings, and then the black woman is queen. If you want to speak on that, and then we'll have our guest here, Wallace, ask his question.
Yeah. Well, I to distill it down pretty quickly, and I think it's very apt at it in the present moment. I write about Dr. Umar Johnson. I was going to do a kind of mirror to what I did with the Black Love Industry chapter, where I kind of give a kind of brief thumb sketch of some of the major players. It wasn't a comprehensive list by any means, but I wanted to try to hit on some of the major players on that side. And I was going to do the same thing for the pro black chapter, but I was like, the book is already kind of, getting long in the tooth as it is. So let me just shorten it down. So I decided to focus on one person that was kind of like a composite of all the people that I was thinking about. And that person is Dr. Umar Johnson. So Dr. Umar Johnson, um, he's a legitimate PhD, very well educated, you know, basically famous, successful. Quite a few ladies think that he's good looking. Strikes an interesting figure in African garb or more Western style suit. Makes the whole media junkets in Black America and the Chitlin circuit in Black America, social media and so forth. He's always got his name out there. And he says things a lot of Black women who, let's face it, often are single moms. Many of them are baby mamas, that is to say, children without benefit of marriage. Often have boys and no, male influence to help them. A person like Dr. Umar Johnson is very attractive. He says the right things. Racism has a powerful allure for a lot of Black people. It serves as a way to assuage their failures in life. They don't have to, deeply examine themselves. They can blame it on the white man or the white system, institutional racism, systemic racism, stuff like that has a powerful allure. So somebody like a Dr. Umar Johnson, can tell these women that they're queens and all the rest of it and take their money and not deliver on anything. That's the
So he's a kind of select F boy, right?
Oh, absolutely. No,
So there you go.
there was a
To those
lady.
who were asking about the F boy, that's another
Yeah,
nuance
yeah.
to it
I,
there.
I was about to say there was a lady I saw there. I can't remember her name. She wanted to know what an F boy is. Dr. Umar Johnson is one. Derek Jackson is another.
There you go. That keeps, yeah, now we have examples. We have the
Yeah.
theoretical framework and then we have the examples. So Wallace, what you got for us on the topic, sir?
Well, I have a question to Obsidian. I hope you both can hear me.
Yeah.
I'm a Brazilian guy, but I can also see the F-boy effect here in Brazil. And basically, my question regarding this is, what is your thoughts about the F-boy effect? Because basically, when the F-boy is laying out there, that also means that the average man is basically getting nothing. And we know that as a matter of a fact, that when males doesn't get sex, when males doesn't get affection, they usually doesn't try to contribute as much as they could for society because they are not with a romantic partner, if I could say it so. So my question would be related to that. What do you think are going to be the middle term and the long term effects of the F-boy in the dating scene and also outside of the dating scene?
You're a F boy, Wallace? Is that why you're out there? Just how you slide in, you're sliding in shirtless into the ladies' DMs. What the hell's going on? But anyways, I just I had to say that. Now, so I'll let you take it, Obsidian. You know, F boy,
Yeah.
80-20 rule, men not getting their stuff, gonna blow up into a conflagration of violence and nuclear
Yeah.
weapons.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Wallace, I'm not able to really go into the Brazilian situation. Because I'm just too ignorant of it. I haven't studied it. I've never been there. So I don't feel comfortable. There's one thing I don't do is talk about stuff that I have very little understanding or experience of or information on. I refrain from doing that. Matter of fact, you would know a whole lot better about it than me. And I'm sorry that I'm not able to
Okay,
really.
let me throw this
Oh,
into him
sorry.
then. Let me ask you, Wallace.
Uh-huh.
Do you against paying for it? Let's throw that into the mix, right? Let's open that can of worms. Okay, these men are not getting whatever they need, and when men don't get this, blah blah blah. Okay, well then, simp, go pay for it. Are you against that?
No, because there is like direct payment and indirect payment. There are some men that the only way so they can get some affection is basically paying. So they're basically directly simping, but you can also indirectly be a simp too. So it's a matter of choice. We have to have our freedom. And Obsidian, I'm sorry if I give the impression that I was asking related to Brazil, but I wasn't asking for the FY perspective of Brazil itself, but from the
Hmm.
place that because basically I hear the things that happen in the US and they also happens here sometimes, the majority of times, the F-boy thing that also happens in the US on the dating scene like Tinder, those dating apps, it also happens here. So I can relate even if we have this geographical distance.
Okay, so
Yeah, yeah. I
Obsidian,
haven't
any?
studied it. What I would love to do,
Mhm.
and of course, we still have this. We're still laboring under the yoke of the pandemic, but at some point, it's going to dissipate finally. As a matter of fact, as it turns out, I just got my second Pfizer vax shot today. Feeling great. I'm not dead. Knock on wood. But but yeah, what I'd like to do, because I want to investigate more, and it may even become a book. I want to investigate more of the SYSBM issue, the Passport Brothers issue. So what I wanted to do was hit up Brazil, and Dominican Republic and Colombia, and just kind of do some boots on the ground type of long form investigation. So I was thinking of taking the several months out and just going in that area of the world. So that may not happen until 2023, 2024. We'll see.
do you think there's a risk of any kind of violence or anything like that vis-a-vis America? Because he just kind of mentioned that perhaps.
There's always a risk of it.
Okay, shout out to the other guest in the building. Okay. The other guest in the building. What you got for us, sir?
Yeah. Shout out to you and the old man. Great book, by the way. I really enjoyed reading it. I think you've kind of shown, you've proven something to me. You are a very refined man. The way you wrote it, I mean, you had this whole kind of framework. You started with the macro stuff that was affecting our community, and then you went down into the individual stuff, and then you did this nice interplay of how they all relates to each other as the individual black man, as you said earlier. So what's his purpose? You now know how we got here. You know how the situation is going to be treating you. You know how, let's say, with your 10 commandments. I mean, I think that was it was a nice way to end the book as well, especially. So a question I have here for you is what advice do you give black men to be able to reach the level that you have, right? I was there in the beginning on your show on YouTube when you were starting off the manosphere. I remember we had a lot of guests. Even spoke to that woman. I forgot her name. Anyways, I forgot the name, but the point is, I was there from the beginning, and I saw everything that you did, all the works and you put throughout these years. I mean, what made you kind of stick out to this thing this whole time? And finally, you've reached what I would say is the Peter principle, the Matthew principle. In the Bible, it talks about how basically there's three people. One is given 1 talent, another one's given 3, another one's given 5. The one who's given 5 basically quadruples it. The one who's given 1 just buries it and saves it. And then God actually takes away the little from the people who didn't do anything with it and gave it to the one with the most. Point is, you're now at the position in your life where opportunities are going to keep rolling in. And, congratulations, honestly. So question I have here is, what sort of advice would you give to the average black man to be able to, I guess, navigate life until they reach, places where you have been? It's incredible.
Yeah, thank you. What I would say to any black man in the United States of ADOS background in particular, I would say this, that you are living in an unparalleled time. Yes, there are challenges. That's true. But the sky's the limit, man. The sky truly is the limit. I mean, you want to do something, the only thing that's stopping you is you. You can make as much money as you want. You can get as famous as you want. If you want to focus on being, sexually successful and all that, there are a lot of women that will accommodate you. Whatever it is that you want to do, you can do it, man. I mean, there's never been a time where the black man has been freer than now. And I would say to any brother that what should they do? They got to seize the day, man. Carpe diem, and really go for it. Go for your guns, More black men develop a can-do spirit, man. I've noticed that there's a sense of malaise and pessimism and nihilism on the part of a lot of black men, and a lot of black men need to develop a can-do spirit, man. Look at failure as you getting one step closer to where you want to be. That's how I look at it. I look at failure as just me getting one step closer. All right, cool. It didn't work out this way, but I'm getting close though. I'm getting closer.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to look at it, honestly. Because I've seen a lot of people kind of ask, how do you overcome failure? But if one actually starts to look at it as, oh wait, I'm not failing exactly, I'm just getting closer. This way didn't work. I now have a map. Like, that's how you make a map. It's actually actually really good advice there. So
let me take, before I'll let you follow up. You may have a follow up question. Do you have a follow up question? I presume.
Go ahead.
So just taking your point there of the failures, seeing it as getting closer. My first video was about telling other people how many failures it takes, right? In other words, if I ask, hey, what does it take to have a successful YouTube channel with at least 50,000 subs? And you'd be like, you know what? It takes about 300 crappy videos and then about 100 ones that you start getting slick when you find the system, right? That's now I got a formula, because in the world of sales, right, that is used a lot. How many phone calls do I need to make in order to get one person, in order to then get How many one of those calls do I then can I move to close, and so on and so forth. So, what shall I say, etc. Now, Obsidian, in your attempt, what would you say? What are some of the challenges? Because that's what this is about. That way, somebody can see. Okay, well, you're going to need to jump over 3 hills. There's a lake over there. What is this mythological story? Where are the dragons hidden, and so on and so forth? If you can pull anyone out, right? And then re-answer the question from that vantage point, if you will.
Yeah. When I was in the thick of doing all this, to be brutally frank, I wasn't thinking about any of that. I was just thinking, how I'm gonna get through this book and finish it and get it done and all of that. So I would say to any guy that's looking to set out on his magnum opus, his great work, ain't nothing to it but to do it, man. Just jump in and get to work. And as things, take form and shape, as Kevin likes to put it, you build the plane while you're flying it. Setbacks will happen. That's inevitable with any project. Of course, you want to have fewer of them than more of them, but that's to be expected. And you just jump in. That's what I did. And make it happen.
100%. So go ahead, K. Polymath.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that I appreciate the time that you gentlemen have given to us out here, sharing a lot of gems. And I think, especially for the book, I think everyone should read it. Go read it, see for yourself, understand how we got here, understand how the future can be your own path. Do not allow people to just basically manipulate you into doing things. Do it if you want to, right? You can go and engage yourself in anything, but at the end of the day, take responsibility for the fact that you chose to do it. Because I think that's what went throughout the last part of the book, which I think I really appreciated. Is, the same way that they can't come for you and say, okay, you're being colorist. It's the same way you can't tell them, well, you should choose me. You can say it and you can feel it, and maybe some of them will listen. But at the end of the day, life will deal you the cards, and you play with it the best way you can. Now, cheers a lot, and peace, brothers.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So let's start wrapping this up with the rules that I've kind of clumped into groups, right? Because again, I see the through line of this book being individual stoicism. On the individual end, okay, so we're talking about the 10 commandments, which obviously there's the 10 commandments, and then there's the 12 rules for life, and now there's 10 obsidian commandments. Shout out to Jordan Peterson. Number 3 and 4 are about Black women owe you nothing, right?
That's right.
And conversely, number 4 follows from number 3, which is you don't owe them a thing either. This is you're saying it's a lonely world, individual, no one owes you anything. And I like how K. Polymath closed out. That's why I brought this up, saying, hey, you can't tell people what to want, right? And so on and so forth. So what exactly were you trying to get across here with these 2 rules, 3 and number 4, about nobody owes you anything and you don't owe them anything either? What were you trying to get across?
Yeah, that was something that I wanted to I wanted a lot of people to really zero in on, because there's one thing I've learned when I was, growing up. A lot of Black women kind of, made it a slogan or kind of a mantra, and they will be really careful to tell you, Black women don't owe you anything. So you had the whole street harassment thing and all the rest of it. Black women don't owe you anything, and there's a lot of truth in that. Black women don't owe you anything. But what I noticed is that the other side was never mentioned. You don't owe them anything either. See, a lot of Black women don't like to hear that. Black women believe that Black men owe them something because they're the mothers of civilization, because they have vaginas and they have the ability to push out a human life. Therefore, all Black men owe Black women something. And my position is the only Black woman that I owe something to would be my mother. She's been dead for almost 20 years.
So you're pretty debt free.
Yeah.
Obsidian out here living debt free. So yeah, that's those 2. And then continuing in the individualistic theme, I would say like 5, 6, and 10, you're not the savior of the community, right?
Right.
You're only responsible for yourself.
Right.
And then when it's no longer fun, that's when you're done. That,
Yeah.
and it's about the life, liberty. You have rights to enjoy your life, and you have rights, shall I say, to the ends of your work, right? The products of your work, the products of your pursuit, the pursuit of happiness, the pursuit of property. So you're continuing there saying basically you're not the savior of the community. Now let me ask this though. Is there not a, shall we say, are you trying to say, is this a tactical retreat from the community in order to maybe come back to the community later to save the community, right? Or are you saying, hey, it's kind of, there is no community at some point, new leaves start, the quarks, the gluons, then the electrons and the protons are still doing what they're doing. And I'm going to keep on doing we're going to keep on doing what we do, and things will progress going forward. I'm going to do my part.
The
Go
problem
ahead.
with the community thing is that instead of it being on a individual voluntary basis, black women and some black men, I'm not going to just lay this just solely at the feet of black women, because there's a number of black men who believe this too, and I talk about this in the book The Race Man. And then you have your reform F boys. So I mean, and then you have your true believers. So you do have a motley crew of black men on this as well. Instead of them being cool with black men being a kind of coalition of the willing, they want to try to dragoon us into service, so to speak, kind of like a draft. And that's what I reject. It's one thing if a black man chooses of his own free will to be a stepdad, chooses to be a volunteer, chooses to be a mentor to children, in this case, male children. That's one thing. It's something else to kind of be beat over the head with this idea that you're kind of dragooned into a draft to save the community. And there's something else too with black women. I talk about this in the book. When I asked black men, I did a poll one time. I said, when I asked black men, when you hear the words black women, does the word fun instantly come to mind? And it was like an overwhelming majority of black men said no. Black women approach mating as if it was a community organizing project. Kind of reminds me of like the neighborhood cleanup or something. You give you a broom, and another guy gets a rake, and another guy gets a shovel or whatever. And you kind of just cleaning up all day, and another guy gets to paint, whatever. Another guy gets, take out dumpster trash. I mean, it's like a job. And for somebody like me who has been working hard all my life since 18, and I retired early at 40. And that's 22 years of my life, man, that I've been working hard, man, grinding with only one, vacation. And since then, after, a kind of quasi extended period of being an intern, so to speak, in the white manosphere, refining my writing chops, I spread out on my own to be a businessman in my own right. And 6 years later, the last thing I want to do with any black woman is feel like I'm going back to work again. A lot of black women make it so that you're doing a lot of work, and that's not fun. A lot of black women, I'm not trying to be mean when I say this, and I'm not saying this is true of every last black woman, obviously, but generally speaking, a lot of black women aren't fun. They're work, and you're sitting there thinking to yourself, for what exactly? What am I getting out of it? If you're a non-select guy, what are you getting out of this?
Oh yeah. By the way, I think you answer before we give more of the commandments. There's an age-old question, Wallace. Okay, there's an age-old question that's been plaguing all of humanity, and Obsidian tackled the question and perhaps answered it successfully in his book. The question, Obsidian, is: are shorter men better husbands?
Yeah. That's another. It's interesting.
People have been wanting to know.
Yeah, I'm in the early stages of a book on heightism in dating. Early stages of it, and that's going to be interesting because, as far as I know, nobody has tackled that topic singularly before. So I'm really excited about that. I don't know when it's going to come out, but I have the early beginning. I got about 4, maybe 5 books in various stages of pre-production and production right now. That some more than others, that need to be finished and, you know, polished up and stuff like that. So the next 5 years is going to be very interesting.
So it's a definitive yes. Shorter men make better husbands. Okay.
Yeah, the
Got it.
study bear it out. 70,000 couples studied by, if I'm not mistaken, NYU and University of Virginia. Yeah.
Okay.
Better lovers too.
Oh, damn. You guys are coming for us. Okay. All right.
Yeah, much
All
better
right.
lovers. Yeah.
All right. All right. All right. All right. So continuing with the commandments, okay, there is now the life is unfair and then you die, right?
Yeah.
And also that there are 2 rules, one for the select and one for the non-select, which is basically just speaking of general unfairness. And this is commandment number 1 and number 2, right?
Right.
This is where, again, this is the just stoicism kind of clearly stated there. Why did you feel the need to mention the life is, you know, unfair and there you die aspect of things?
Because it's true.
Because it's true.
You know, one thing I didn't want to do in doing this book is I didn't want to go into the same type of platitudes. You know, as you, it probably comes as no shock to you, right? I did a lot of research, not just on Black love literature. That is to say, stuff that was written for Black women. So, you know, I read Steve Harvey's book and Hill Harper's book and Derek Jackson's book and so on and so forth. So not only did I do that, but I also read the upcoming Black male dating coaches books. And what I noticed that was a kind of theme running through all of them is they would have these kind of pat sloganeering. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do something that was earnest and honest, and, you know, to tell the truth. You know, I'm not going to tell you that you only get a dime. No. You do this, you get a dime. No. No. Matter of fact, I don't even promise that you get a woman at all. It's very possible that you could do everything right and still fail. That is an unfortunate fact of life. Happens all the time. Good men fail and bad men win. That's a part of life. I don't like it. I prefer it when not true, but it is. And if you're in Black America, all you have to do is take a look around. Bad guys win all the time. Good guys lose all the time. And since you talked about the stoicism, you need a kind of North Star that extends beyond the carnal to kind of keep you on an even keel with that sort of thing. You know, I don't like talking about my own personal religious views, but since we're there, you have to have some type of religious or philosophical North Star, because there are going to be times in life that you know, it's going to suck, you know, no matter what you do. And some of the most poignant and painful parts of life have to do with women, or that is to say, relationships, love, romance,
Family, children, divorce court, alimony.
Right. So I mean, you know, you have to have some type of North Star to kind of keep you on an even keel, man. So I really kind of wonder what the atheists among us do, because in my personal opinion, you know, if you're an atheist and you don't have, human history, and I know this is might get me in trouble for saying this because I am a believer, as my namesake goes. I don't hate atheists. Let me say, I don't dislike them. I just think that they're very, you know, misguided. They're wrong. There is another dimension to this world that is not meant to be quantified and measured. And, you know, I'm a man of science. I'm a man of letters. I'm a man of science. I'm for the scientific method. But one thing I've learned in life is that everything cannot be answered via scientific means, nor should it. There are transcendent aspects of life, the sublime, the spirit, that informs greatly the meaning of life, your role in the grand scheme of things, your purpose in this world, there's something to be said for that. I'm not saying that it can't be criticized. I think the atheists are right about this. I'm not saying that it can't be criticized. You studying, this is what I implore the atheists to do. The four horsemen, I know you know who they are, the atheists. They had a hell of a run in the past decade. Dawkins et al., the late great, Christopher Hitchens and so forth. Daniel Dennett and all them guys. What's really unfortunate about these people, and there's another one, his name is on the tip of my tongue right now. Good looking Jewish guy. I can't think of his name right now. His name is on the tip of my tongue. Help me out for people in the chat room. He's got a popular podcast. He did a one-on-one debate with Jordan Peterson. Sam
Harris.
Sam Harris, that's it. These guys are so smart and so incredibly dumb at the same time. They don't study the great debates between, the rabbis. They don't study the great debates between the imams.
Hold on a second. Let me conjecture something. Because I hear you 100%. And what I'm going to contend is there's a big part of this whole conversation. Take, for example, the conversation between Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, right? Because that's basically the same conversation, right?
Right.
That it's an experiential thing and meaning thing. So one person is talking about meaning, Jordan Peterson, you, right? Meaning, experience. Someone else is talking about what they consider to be big T truth, defined via scientific method, empiricism, and rationality, right? Yeah. And if you're not somebody whom appreciates, for example, because I think these two things are adjacent, what I'm about to say now, because it's an analogy, but they're closely related. If you have a certain appreciation for art, of which religiosity and rituals are the highest form of, highest form of dance and looking up to what, right? It's the same thing. Whether you're doing the Eucharist or a painting, right, if you will, it's in the same arena. And religion, you would say, it's at the top of the hierarchy in that arena.
Right.
There's a certain kind of appreciation for that whole thing. And it's an aesthetic appreciation that some people just don't have. Right. So when you try to have a conversation with them, you miss. But in their experiential life, okay, so goes my contention now, that they do actually have a North Star, okay? But they just can't talk about it with you. Am I making any sense?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And, so what's fascinating about these guys is that they don't study the fact that a lot of great theological minds from the world's great faiths have debated the legitimacy of their faith and other faiths down through the centuries, be it Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, you name it. They've had great debates. So I'm not saying that you have to be just a blind, lemming going off a cliff. I think that there's a lot of room for debate and being something of an agnostic to some extent. But I reject the idea that these guys have of a kind of almost evangelical or zealous atheism. I kind of reject it because when I look at the sweep of human history, it was people who embodied the best aspects of God, irrespective of religion. Gandhi instantly comes to mind. Mother Teresa instantly comes to mind. Martin Luther King Jr. instantly comes to mind, for example, who's exemplified the best of what it meant to be human and inspire others. We don't see that with atheists. In fact, we see the exact opposite. We see Pol Pot. We see Stalin.
Okay, wait. Hold on a second. I think that is rather it's not generous of you to do that. And I would even accuse you of being unphilosophical now, right? Because we know that the people whom you may be defining as atheist versus theism versus believing or not, we know that question is so subtle, difficult, and complex, such that somebody can ask Jordan Peterson, and I'm a Jordan Peterson guy. What I mean by Jordan Peterson guy is this. If you ask me if I believe in God, I'm going to answer the Jordan Peterson way. I don't know what you're talking about until we can together walk into that inner sanctum where my meaning and your meaning are, if you can come there with me, if you can understand my language and my symbolism as we go there, then I can answer the question for you. But if you come to me with some kind of shorthand, secret handshake, do I believe in God? I don't know what you're talking about. So that's why I would say that's kind of disingenuous for you to, you're painting with a broad brush. Would you agree?
I wouldn't. And I've taken a long time to study this. I've studied a lot of history with regard to the Khmer Rouge. I actually know Cambodians who fled the Khmer Rouge, and the children, who go now they're adults. I have a good friend of mine who I used to work with, who was from Vientiane, Laos. His father was a colonel in the army. I've known a lot of people from that area of the world, and had a chance to really delve into its history with regard to Mao and Kim Il Sung, who started the Juche kind of movement, communist Marxist movement in North Korea. My father fought in Korea. Again, I did a lot of history, a lot of study into the history of the Soviet era, and Stalin in particular, and his vicious purges and stuff like that. Yeah, the all of this came under the rubric of a godless society, and I think the verdict is in. The historical verdict is in. Dostoevsky says it best in his immortal classic,
Yeah.
The Brothers Karamazov, that when God is not, all is permitted.
I agree with you, Dostoevsky and Nietzsche, with regards to the prediction, of, basically the prediction of the, after God is dead, what follows, right? So 100%. It's I guess we should have a separate conversation about this particular topic, but more from a philosophical grounding than the religious movements which have said this, that, or the other. In other words, individual to individual, what does it mean to believe something?
Yeah.
Right? What is this God thing? What space does it occupy? All that kind of stuff, right? Because
and it does play a role. I didn't want to go. My book was reviewed by a lovely lady named Shay Charday, who's a relative newcomer to Black YouTube, Black social media. She did a very even-handed. She both wrote and did a video review of my book, and she's a very devout, Christian newlywed, and she said, she was careful to note that my book was much more secular in its writing and feel, and but there's definitely a side to me that I'll put it this way, that's much more transcendental and sublime than many may realize, and at some point, who knows, I may even write about it. But I would love to come back and specifically deal with that question that I've opened a can of worms on here.
Yeah. I like that. So okay, yeah, because we can have a conversation about metaphysics, because so far we've had a conversation about politics, ethics, and aesthetics. The politics and ethics of your book, I contend, is individualistic stoicism, and then the aesthetics. Now I'm going to ask you about as a kind of a roundabout closing question, because you talk about the gentleman. It's in the title, right?
Yeah.
The manual for the gentleman, and you also mention in one of the, I believe, rules 7 and 10 have to do with doing your part, being nice and
Right.
being polite, dressing well, that kind of a thing, carrying yourself in a certain way, doing your part from that individual standpoint of a gentleman. And also, I believe there's another one that talks about, hobbies, right?
Oh yeah.
So there's an aesthetic, governing the book. There's an aesthetic wise, the North Star seems to be that of the gentleman. So
Right.
what exactly were you trying to say there? I know I've asked the question before, but I wanted to ask you vis-a-vis these two, because the two commandments there, they kind of address that thing of the aesthetic. And it is, after all, a message always has an aesthetic portion of it. So the aesthetic portion is this gentleman thing. What exactly are you trying to say as a way of closing us out here? What does this gentleman stuff mean to you?
It's pretty I guess it would be anticlimactic, but I'll go ahead and say it. Black men have an image, and this is straight rip from Kevin, and I'll go ahead and link it right now. When I finally do get on the camera, a lot of people are going to be saying he's just like Kevin, yeah. You'll see, God willing, when that happens. Black men have an image problem, and it's up to black men to fix it. We need more Sir Sidney Poitiers and less Lil Waynes. I didn't say no Lil Waynes. I didn't say only Sir Sidney Poitiers. I said we need more Sir Sidney Poitiers and less Lil Waynes. Image does matter, and black men have the power to be able to do something about it. We have 100% control over that, and it does matter. Optics matter, looks matter, and it's not just with regard to women, although it is obviously true there, but it's with regard to life in general. People take you more seriously when you take yourself seriously.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm. Yeah, I always say,
I never had a problem with the cops, and the reason,
100%.
and one reason is because I took myself seriously.
Mhm.
Don't dress the way knuckleheads do. Don't hang out where knuckleheads are known to hang out. Don't have friends who are known knuckleheads.
Seems pretty simple, right?
Yeah. And I've been treated with nothing but respect by cops. White, Asian, black, male, female. I've been treated but nothing but respect, man. Because I take myself seriously. Dress like a man, act like a man, look like one. A few years back, I had that epiphany moment, getting back to the religious thing. Had an epiphany moment where it dawned on me I was only a few months out or less from turning 50. I'm 52 now. And I'll soon be 53, inshallah. And a voice, kind of came to me. He said, Obsidian, you've been doing this now 5 years, or coming up on 5 years. And you're staring down 50. And you're about to, and you're a businessman. And you're somebody now. And it's time to look like one. And I got up from my chair that moment, turned the computer off, got me a ride downtown to a place called the Suit Store on Chestnut Street. And I got me a tailored 3-piece suit, gray, and never looked back.
Got it. Yeah, there's something about, that particular cocktail party where everyone has a tux on and all tied up and buttoned up that brings out the best behavior in you. You don't act a fool when you carry yourself a certain way, because there is something about, that Sigma male energy that wants to say, well, why should I have to wear anything anyone says? I'm the philosopher king of 27 realms. How dare you tell me anything, right? But it's like, hey, Mr. Philosopher King and God of 27 realms, it actually is effective in the world which you have to live in, a world of human beings, and human beings dressed up together in a particular way, eating from silverware in a particular way, in a particular kind of a setting, brings out a very different kind of behavior. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Because as I believe Carl Jung was, and others, but Jordan Peterson definitely, we're monkeys filled with snakes, right? We as individuals know that we don't quite know what we might get from somebody. And I think that's why the tradition of asking people how they are, like good morning, how are you every day, because you never quite know when the guy turns around and just stabs you that morning, right?
Yeah.
Because we understand what it is to be a consciousness and a psyche. Who knows what he dreamt up, or maybe got crazy, got possessed by, who knows, right? So the idea of us having these kind of formal, ritualistic ways of putting ourselves in a particular kind of focus, in a particular kind of frame, is just simple, good old magic, simple, good old ritual, simple, good old tradition, simple, good old human stuff, right? So that's the reason why, Mr. Philosopher King, you should do certain things. It's not because you're conforming. Stop being a child. Shout out to Blind Guy, his wife, their life, and then we'll close this out. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Says, you're always the sponsor, always donating very generously. Definitely go out there and check out their channel, Blind Guy, His Wife, Their Life. Great information out there. And I always enjoy the end part 2 where they, give a recipe at the end, plant-based recipe, ladies and gentlemen. So again, our guest is our continued, perhaps in the future, interlocutor for sure, Obsidian. Obsidian Lee, the author of the Book of Obsidian. Go out and check it out. Do you have paperback again?
Yeah.
Or You still
Yeah.
okay? Good.
You can order the book. You know, you can get the book anywhere on planet Earth. It's on sale everywhere. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, Costco, you name it. It's everywhere. In various formats. People have been asking about an audio book. I'm looking into that. Hopefully I'll have it by the end of the year. Let's keep our fingers crossed. In the meantime, you can get it in print and in ebook / Kindle. And if you want a signed autograph copy, there's been a lot of supply chain problems, but we hope that this will be straightened out by late next month. So you can go ahead and put in the pre-order for it. Send $35 or more to my Cash App, $Obsidian Radio, or to my PayPal, www.paypal.me/Obsidian Talk Radio. Please don't forget to include your name and address. I'll be happy to send you a signed autograph copy this time next month when all the supply chain problems are finally cleared up.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure, sir. And until next time, all right, we are going to give you guys a little Blind Guy, His Wife, Their Life sponsored this little verse. Something I wrote when I was 17. It was kind of like this kind of West Coast kind of grimy gang, rap type feel. In my dreams, I see your fiend handing out leaflets that warn of the second coming of Jesus. While police disturb the peace and see shit, I be chilling in the corner counting gold pieces. Cause money is the shit I bust my ass for. Money keeps me rolling on the asphalt. What the ladies ask for, I got the cash for. Even got my pimp license and passport. Something like that. Rope a dope, go for hope, blow for boat, all the gun tote, run yo. Jump hoops with the jump rope, the intrigue, deeply seated within me, the sensei. Write lecture notes on the template, checkmate, Teflon the brass on the breastplate, the best way. Aha. Ladies and gentlemen, we are out until next time. We'll be back tomorrow. Check us out with Ike and Dr. Thunder getting ish done. Okay, as usual. Every Tuesday we are here. And then on Wednesday, I'll be here with Joan reviewing. I cannot talk. I can only rap. And with that, let's give you a little splash, and then we're gone. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what's a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what was behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannon could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.